Hello, and welcome to the 8th part of I Scream by the Neopolitan. We're in chapter 26. Just gonna get right going. We sort of saw what happened with the other two groups in the last part. This time we get to see what the other one is, or what happens with the other one. Rach led Bolt and Blake to their location on the map, or in the map. Their location was also in the woods, but they came to a cave, not a hole in the ground. If they hadn't been looking for it, they wouldn't have found it. No random hiker would stumble upon it. It looked to be a simple hole in the cliff. "Are you sure this is it?" Bolt asked. Rach gave him a look that scolded him for even asking. They entered the dark tunnel. It was nearly implausible to see anything at first, unless you were a faunus or had fire dust. After a short distance of walking blind, lit torches guided the way. "Strange," Blake said, breaking the silence as they continued down the tunnel. "What is?" Bolt asked the cat faunus curiously. "If this was a White Fang base, shouldn't we have come across some White Fang members by now? I mean, clearly there's someone here, but that doesn't really seem like the White Fangs thing." "You've got a point," Raish nodded. "Proceed with caution." They continue in silence until they came to a large set of wooden doors. The trio paused just outside the doors and prepared themselves. "Be careful, there could be an ambush just inside," Raish warned. Blake drew her blades out of her sheath and crouched down low. Bolt loaded his bow and readied an arrow. Raish held all of her daggers between her fingers. "Ready?" Bolt asked, reaching towards the door. Blake and Raish nodded. Bolt counted down in a whisper. 3, 2, 1. He yanked open the door, and Blake rolls into the room ready to strike. She came to a crouch and quickly scanned the room for any threat, and found none. "Clear," she called back to the other two. "There's no one here." "What?" Bolt asked in surprise as both he and Raish entered the room. "The room is empty. There is no one here," Blake repeated as the group looked around the room. It seemed to be a meeting hall of some sort. There were two sets of doors similar to the ones that they had come in, with one on the right and one on the left, forming a sort of triangle. The room itself was circular and seemed to be carved out of stone that they had entered when they went into the tunnel. Off to the sides were impressively large stone pillars. In the center was a large circular table with four chairs all made of stone. They stood tall and proud with symbols carved into each of them. Rach walked over and examined the symbols. They were carved into the stone and painted the appropriate color of the symbol. The one closest to her seemed to be a black pair of shoes that formed a heart shape, exactly the same symbol as the one that Cinder had tattooed on her back. "This is Cinder. Do you recognize anyone else?" Blake gasped quietly as she remembered another of the symbols and who it belonged to. She walked over slowly and traced it slowly with her fingers. It was a red rose, but not like rubies. This one had a stem that sank down and formed a part of a sort of check mark. There was two petals, with one being on either side of the stem. It was a symbol that she knew well. It belonged to her own mentor. "Adam Torres, this is her symbol," she sighed, dropping her hand. "He was my mentor and my friend." Raish placed a comforting hand on the cat faunus's shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said calmly, but she meant it. The two words may have been simple, but the way that Raish had said them made them mean so much more. "Will you be okay?" "Yeah," Blake told the other girl, pulling herself together, "but I don't recognize any of the other symbols. Well, besides that one. The one that she indicated had to have the White Fang on it. White Fang symbol on it. It was probably for the lieutenant, but there was a thin layer of dust that covered his chair, but not the others, meaning that he was only invited or knew about some of the meetings held at this table." The last mark was a purple umbrella that was partially opened, forming a sort of arrow. "I've seen this before," Bolt said, holding his hand under his chin as he thought. He shook his head and scratched it. "I just can't remember." "That's all right, sweetheart. You won't be alive to tell anyone anyway," a woman's voice said, coming from a different one of the doors. Raish was the first to react. Cinder, she cried, realizing who the woman was. The black-haired girl just smirked at her. Then Raish changed. Her body nearly shook with anger, and her eyes seemed to glow with rage, remembering that this was the woman who had killed her girlfriend, Nevermora. I'll kill you, she snarled. Raish, don't, Bolt called, but his leader was too far gone to listen to him as she charged recklessly towards Cinder, clutching her daggers tightly. Raish barely even noticed other White Fang members along with the people who had seen Roman's men entering the room. She threw one handful of daggers at the woman with eyes that glowed like embers and used the other handful to try to slash her face. With a smug smirk, Cinder's clothing lit up with fire dust as she used small amounts of flame to almost flick away Raish's daggers. Raish was too angry to focus and think clearly enough to control them. Instead of circling around and coming back to her like they normally would have, they embedded deeply into the stone behind Cinder. Raish was close now and tried to slash at Cinder's face with the remaining 3 daggers in her hand. Cinder's smirk didn't budge as she knocked Raish's hand to the side with a bit of fire dust, making Raish give a small cry and drop her daggers as her hand was burnt. Cinder didn't even waste a second to knee Raish in the gut and then kick her to the ground to the side. Sorry, children. I'd love to stay and play, but I've got places to be, Cinder said. Cinder sighed. She turned to one of the men just behind the door and said, "Make sure Nicholas knows that he might have company at the other location." The man nodded and walked off. Cinder waved as Raish pulled herself up with her knees with a growl of effort, called her daggers out of the stone wall and off the floor so they floated just behind her. Cinder wasn't phased at all. In fact, she waved to Raish as 2 other men reached for the wooden doors. "Farewell," she smirked before turning around. Raish yelled in frustration and sent her daggers forward with more speed and force than she could ever hope to throw them. Unfortunately, actions like that use a lot of resemblance, and it still wasn't enough. Cinder's men managed to close the doors just before the daggers reached them. Beautiful blades sank deeply into the wood that even their handles disappeared. Raish shouted again in frustration, but used a few breaths to try to calm herself. But angry tears threatened to fall from her eyes. How could she let Mora's murderer get away that easily? "Raish, help us," Blake called to the other girl, bringing Raish back to the situation at hand. She shook her head and focused as men continued to swarm into the room. Blake and Bolt stood back to back with their weapons drawn as the men began to circle them. Raish's eyes widened in surprise. How could she have let this happen? She was supposed to lead them, but she got caught up in her own vendetta that she just left them there. She called her daggers back to her hands and stood beside the other 2. "I'm sorry," she apologized. "We understand," Blake nodded. "Now let's do this," Bolt shouted, firing arrows at the incoming men. Not another ad. Hope you like ads. Okay. Chapter 27. I watched as Mercury and Emerald began to circle around me. I stood protectively next to Yang, who still hadn't moved. I wondered how long I would be able to hold them off. They were a hard enough fight when I was on my own, but now I had to make sure they didn't get to her. I opened my umbrella and tested on my shoulder, doing my best not to show any concern. Mercury turned to Emerald and said, "Hey, if we take Miss Ice Cream home alive, do you think Cinder will let me keep her?" "What?" she asked, this question catching her off guard as much as it had me. The silver-haired boy shrugged and walked closer to me. "All I'm saying is that I've been a good boy. I deserve a little treat." "You're disgusting," Emerald snapped, wrinkling her nose. Mercury laughed and turned to her, saying, "Whatever. You're just jealous." What is that? Like, you've spelled Mercury 3 times wrong in this chapter alone, and how can you possibly spell the same name wrong 3 times in one chapter that's not even close to half the page? Like, probably not even quarter of the page done, and you spelled the same name wrong 3 times. I just, ugh. This is annoying. Whatever, you're just jealous because you want me to. As if, Emerald scoffed. That was my opening. As they were caught up by bickering with each other, I made my move. I kicked Mercury again. It's wrong. Like, can you, like, spell it correctly? Like, just once in this entire book. This entire story. Like, it's really not that hard. I just can't. Okay. I kicked Mercury square in the gut, sending him flying. Emerald shot at me with her pistols, which I blocked with my open umbrella. I quickly flipped over to her and attacked. I flicked my umbrella closed and swung it at her face. She blocked it with her guns that had turned into 2 green sickles. Ducking down, I swung my legs at her feet, kicking them out from under her and causing her to fall. I glanced back and saw Mercury was getting up. I kicked Emerald hard in the side and then flipped back over to Yang, who still hadn't moved. I wanted desperately to try to shake her awake, but I had to stay focused. I watched Mercury closely and listened for Emerald. Mercury made a pouty face at me from the floor, saying, "Now that wasn't very nice, sweet thing." Before I could respond, he charged at me, using a few flips to repeatedly kick at me. I blocked one with my umbrella, pushed one aside with my hands, and tried to block the third with my leg, which was a stupid idea. His boots and kicks were his main weapon, and he was just a little stronger than me. His kick met with mine, and I was kicked back. I managed to land in a crouch. I quickly stood, but winced in pain. My leg hurt like he hit it with a baseball bat. I gritted my teeth and held my ground. I wanted desperately to take my weight off of it and limp, but I couldn't do that. It would slow me down too much. I was small, so most of the power... But what? Okay, most of the power behind, not bedtime. That's so... Oh, God. So most of the power behind my attacks came from the speed and momentum. I glared him down until he charged at me again, and heard Emerald run up behind me at the same time. They reached me at the same moment. Emerald swung at me with her sickle while Mercury tried to kick me. I grabbed Emerald's wrist and pulled her forward as I brought my elbow back into her gut. As I brought one arm back to strike Emerald, I brought the other forward to grab Mercury's ankle and with the hook of my umbrella and pulled him towards me before ducking around him and turning to face he and Emerald. Without a moment of hesitation, Mercury tried to spin and kick me in the face. I saw him coming, ducked under his leg, and knocking the other one out from under him and struck him in the chest with my umbrella as he fell. He was done for the moment, but I had focused on him for too long. I barely had time to move my umbrella before Emerald's sickles could slice me to pieces. She had hit me with enough force to knock me back. I lost my footing and fell to the ground, wincing in pain as it hurt my injured leg. Mercury jumped up ready to strike again before I could move. Emerald transformed her sickles into guns and pointed them at my head. My eyes widened in surprise. I had never been thrown down like this, not since I was training to be a henchman anyway. "It's over, Neo," Emerald told me, but a flash of gold behind them brought a smirk to my face. They looked at me in confusion as I arched an eyebrow at them, silently asking, "Is it?" Mercury turned around just in time to see Yang's fist collide with his face. I even heard her gauntlets go off to strengthen her punch. The silver-haired boy was hit so hard that he flew back and rolled before landing face down a little ways away. Before Emerald fully realized what was happening, I hit her hard in the back of my umbrella. Okay. She fell forward unconscious just like Mercury. Yang looked down to me and smirked. "Now that wasn't very nice," I returned her grin and shrugged, telling her without words that I'm not very nice. She laughed, but her laughter was cut short by her scroll going off. "Sup, Rubes? How did your stealth mission go?" the blonde asked to the white device. "Help!" came Ruby's desperate voice from the other end. "Ruby, where are you?" Yang asked, suddenly completely serious. "We're at the first location. We found the White Fang base. It's underground and we're trapped. We need backup." "We're on our way," Ren's voice replied. "Yeah," Nora shouted, ready to help her friends. "I don't know if that will be enough," Ruby said worriedly. We need backup here, too, Ray cut in. We're on it, Jean said quickly. We'll be there shortly, Pierre added. 2 more isn't going to be enough here, Weiss told the group. Yang looked to me, silently asking if we should go. And I nodded. Neo and I are on our way. Don't worry, Ruby. I'm coming, she told the younger girl. Hurry, she urged. We lost Wolf and we don't know where he is. My eyes widened in surprise. If Wolf thought that things were bad enough to break up the group, then they were in serious trouble. We're coming to you now, Yang assured her. She grabbed the briefcase and... What? I'd cash before we left the container. Jumped, briefcase of cash? Like, not... Like... Whatever. Jumped on back onto Yang's motorcycle and rode off into the night. Chapter 28. When Yang and I got to the base, everything was in a state of chaos. We paused for a brief moment at the entrance of the hideout, which had been blown wide open. The sound of gunshots and explosion echoed below us. I looked to Yang, whose lilac eyes showed no fear. You know we might not make it out alive, right? I asked softly. Her eyes moved to stare into my own. My little sister and our friends are down there. Does whatever happens to us really matter? Didn't hesitate to reply. No. Then let's go, she said, jumping into the hole and down the stairs. I followed not a second behind her as we raced down the steps. The inside of the base was lit up like fireworks. I ducked to narrowly avoid being hit by a ricocheting bullet. The place was filling with a dark black smoke and seemed to glow orange. A fire had been started. I didn't sign up for this, a newer White Fang recruit shouted, not even knowing what he was shooting at anymore. Let's get out of here, his friend shouted. They and a few others ran past us. Only a few bothered to shoot as they retreated, but the shots were sloppy and I didn't even have to move to dodge them. Ruby, Yang shouted for her sister as my eyes scanned among the giant shelves of crates for our friends. One of the crates caught fire and fell to the ground, causing a large explosion that forced Yang and I back a few steps. I quickly jumped back a bit further to avoid having one of the flaming splinters go right through me. I glanced aside to make sure Yang had been hit. She punched aside a large piece with her gauntlets and reloaded them. We don't have a lot of time, she said, setting the fire starting to spread towards larger crates. You ready? She asked, looking to me. I gave her a determined smirk and a nod before we charged into the smoke. A White Fang member jumped out at me, pointing her gun in my face. I kicked her gun aside and punched her in the gut. She fell forwards onto her knees. I waited a moment for her next move, but a large explosion went off, causing the whole place to shake as another crate burst into flames. The White Fang girl rose to her feet, but instead of trying to fight me, she ran past me towards the exit. I let her go. We needed to find the others and fast before the rest of the bombs went off. My attention was drawn to my left by the sound of coughing. I turned ready to fight with Yang on my heels as two figures emerged from the smoke. It was Weiss and Pyrrha. There's not two H's in Pyrrha, I'm sorry. Weiss was badly injured. A red gash in her side was staining her white dress. Pyrrha was holding the arrows up, though she herself looked like she could collapse at any moment. Yang and I rushed to their side to try and help. Where's Ruby? Yang asked anxiously. We split up, Weiss said weakly. Jean went looking for her, Pyrrha panted, along with Ren and Nora. Don't worry, we will get them, Yang told them with determination. Can you make it on your own? I asked calmly, though I was on the edge of panic. They were in really rough shape. The place could explode at any second, and there was no sign of Wolf or the others anywhere. I think so, Pierre replied as Weiss coughed up blood. I took a deep breath to steady myself as we watched the redhead and the girl in white go towards the exit. I paused for a moment in confusion. I was used to panic and the chaos. Okay. I was used to the danger of death being so close. So why was I feeling so on edge? Damn it, I thought, realizing that Yang's look of worry matched what I was feeling. I let myself care about them. I wasn't worried for me, I was worried for them, worried for Wolf, for my team, even for Yang and Team RWBY. I needed them to be alright. I pulled my emotions back in and focused myself on the task at hand. Yang's look of worry focused into a look of determination. She nodded at me and I nodded back as we continued forward. It didn't take long to find RWBY. Yang rushed to her side and nearly wrapped her into a form of bear hug, but stopped, realizing that RWBY was bleeding from a wound in her side. She had been grazed by a flaming box shard. Blood covered her hand as she pressed it to her wound. Jean was barely standing by her side, exhausted from all the running and fighting. Nora was kneeling between them, clutching an unconscious Ren, but I could tell that he was still breathing from his chest movements. There was only one person missing now. Wolf? I asked, so worried that my tongue felt numb. I had to choke his name out as a question. He went that way, RWBY said, jerking her head to indicate where he had gone further in. There were some... Okay. There were some really tough guys, like the General of the White Fang. He led them away from us. I looked towards where she looked, but with the flames and smoke, it was impossible to see. Can you guys make it out? Yang asked, helping Nora lift Ren. I think so. What about you? Her sister replied. Yang glanced at me, thinking for a moment before answering RWBY. I waited for her to say that she would help RWBY out or that she'd help carry Ren. We're going to find Wolf, she said determinedly. I glanced up at her in surprise. I was used to people leaving me when things got dangerous. I'm my line of work. It was every girl for herself. Oh, how about in my line of work? Maybe you can, I don't know. See, I feel like too many people, either use their phones to type this out, or, use, I don't know. Really what you should do is use, Microsoft Word or Google Docs and type it all out in there and then just, copy paste it into Wattpad, which would make it easier because then you could, check for mistakes easier and not have autocorrect screwing it up. But I don't know. You can tell who doesn't actually try to find mistakes that they may have made. Because it's just the grammar is so terrible. Okay, in my line of work, it was every girl for herself, especially if that girl was risking her life for her friends. A light blush crept across my cheeks as I gained a new respect for Yang. Luckily, it was covered by the glow of approaching flames. Jean and Nora balanced Ren on their shoulders and RWBY limped beside them. Once we were sure they could make it, Yang and I entered what seemed to be like a wall of smoke. It became nearly impossible to see. I blinked rapidly to keep as much smoke out of my eyes as I could, and one of my hands came over my mouth as I choked. The heat around us was intense. This place could blow at any moment. I glanced to my side to see Yang still beside me. Despite the danger, she squinted through the thick cloud, clearly seeing something. I followed her gaze and could barely make out a figure of a person that was clearly much too big to be Wolf. With a giant sweeping motion of a black umbrella, the figure blew away the smoke. I froze in a mix of fear and disbelief as my heart threatened to pound out of my chest. I instinctively clutched my umbrella tighter. No, it couldn't be. The smoke in my eyes must have changed what I was seeing. He couldn't possibly be here. He was dead. I watched him die. Neo, who is that? Yang asked me, seeing the recognition on my face. I quickly composed myself as the man turned to face me with a giant smirk on his face. Excuse me, miss, Nick whatever, said to me, as my old mentor turned, his cloak revealed an unconscious, possibly dead wolf beneath him. Is this your dog? And that's the end of that chapter. And it's been roughly 24 minutes, so we're gonna end the episode here. To wait till next time to see chapter 29 and all the interesting things going on in there. So yeah, that'll be it. Like I said, next time chapter 29, and there's not that much more. Yeah, there's maybe 2 more episodes, so we're almost done with Ice Cream, but that's only book 1, so yeah. Oh boy, this is gonna get interesting, because this is where the real awesome stuff happens. So yeah.